Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
And I'm Sylvia Earle, National Geographic explorer, founder of Mission Blue. Oh, I'm an oceanographer. And I'm an ocean elder. Thank you, ocean elders, for hosting this program.
Absolutely. And this is our show, Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations on topics of wonder and interest. And we're glad to be back and hope everyone has made some time to get out of doors. You can ask questions by writing it in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can towards the end of the program. And we'll be adding links in the chat for your information as we go along. And as we get underway, let's remind everyone that the world
Is
blue.
blue. Never forget.
And today, for our year-end program, we're so pleased to welcome Katie Zacarian. Katie is the CEO and co-founder, oh my God, of the Earth Species Project, a nonprofit dedicated to using AI to decode animal communication, finding new ways of listening and learning from nature. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz and Sylvia. It's awesome to be here.
Well, we're very excited to hopefully figure out like what the animals around us are trying to say, or get dialed in a little bit, are saying to one another, and we're just kind of like, what are they doing? What are they saying?
Tuning in.
Tuning in. We've heard so much about the nature deficit disorder and disconnection with nature, and really hopeful that the work that you're doing will help people to become more closely connected, not just to their dogs and cats and birds, but to the greater world around them, particularly the 70% of the planet that's blue.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a fundamental sort of hypothesis of our vision is that disconnection is driving the sort of polycrises that we're in, the biodiversity extinction crisis, the human-induced climate change. All of these are predicated on us being disconnected from nature, from our co-species on Earth. And that renewing that connection for so many of us will be the catalyst to bring us back into a system where all the diversity of species can thrive.
I think that's very true, because so oftentimes there have been animals and plants that have just become very much seen as commodities, and they're not really recognized as living creatures and living beings,
and part
living
of what
things.
keeps us alive. And
part of our life support system. It's all,
fundamental.
lashed up. So
Yeah.
it's critically important.
I think we're in so many ways still crawling back from like Rene Descartes still, where we today still think of animals as dumb machines without feelings, without intelligence. And one of the best parts of this work is being in conversation with our co-species on Earth and the scientists who study them, who reveal for so many of us, who decode for so many of us, the profound and magnificent capacities of our planetary neighbors, whether they're, tiny coral larvae or megafauna like the sperm whale. Like, there's just so much to respect and appreciate. And while we know so much, we've barely scratched the surface. And that's what, we're really excited about, standing on the shoulders of so many giants in this incredibly interdisciplinary field to go to the next step.
I really appreciate your, talking about like all the work that has happened in the past, right? Because we've had so many naturalists and scientists and just astute observers that have really worked on animal language over the years, be it, whales or dolphins or wolves or corvids or, whatever they are. There's just so much that's been done. And then trying to really combine those data sets, those historical data sets, together with new information, I think is vitally important.
Well, it's often said that in the ocean, the most common form of communication is with bioluminescence. And for sure, it is a primary means of visual communication and greatly underestimated, underappreciated until very recently. But you could say the same about sound in the sea. Underappreciated, underestimated. The thought that marine mammals make sounds, although it seems obvious today. In the 1950s, just by the first use of hydrophones listening to the ocean in the US Navy, using hydrophones to detect the signatures of ships and to detect where submarines might be cruising, there are certain military advantages to knowing what those sounds that they heard on hydrophones. Who made those sounds? Were they human origin or of some sea creature? And that was part of the background of what Roger and Katie Payne really got started in the 50s and 60s and on through right up to the present time, the really analyzing the communication with, especially with humpback whales, but with whales otherwise, not just their work, but what that has led to by now with many others who have followed along. But the thought that fish make sounds, that you take for
Right.
granted that birds make sounds.
Mhm.
All birds make sounds, probably all mammals make sounds. Why should it be a surprise to think that fish make sounds and that they communicate? They aren't just making random noise, they are communicating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And insects, we get it, kind of, but
Mhm.
crustaceans, they're
Yeah.
they're arthropod counterparts in the ocean. Anybody who's put a lobster in hot water knows that lobsters make sounds. They complain about being cooked. I would.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like the evidence of their sentience is undeniable, which is why it's so great. It's been recognized in the UK with the sentience bill. And I
Mhm.
think in advance of this talk, I was just looking up stuff about fish sounds. You know, what do we know and what do we don't know? And we know some, like I was looking back at an early friend and a colleague in the space, Erica Staderman, who studies toadfish,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we have songs, right? But yet when we estimate, there's a researcher at Cornell who estimates 2/3 of fish communicate through acoustic signals, and yet
Oh,
we know
that we
like so
know about.
little, right?
Yeah.
What about the other
Exactly.
third? You just haven't learned yet what they're.
And we've seen even little freshwater cichlids making sounds. And I know from direct experience, volunteering for many years at the original Steinhardt Aquarium, dealing with the big grouper Ulysses, every time he would see me, I'd get this boom, boom noise, and
Yeah.
he would like turn, look at me, and then make that big, sound, you know. Um,
There you are.
yeah, open his mouth, let me pet him, but it was just
Yeah.
like my dog barking, when he sees me. It was really cool.
Yeah, there's so much that is imperceptible to us, and it's just easy. Like I said, crawling back from this like scientific revolution time where we completely discounted the capacities of animals, and put ourselves at the center of the proverbial universe where we
Yeah.
just extract and exploit. And yet, through new methods and by listening to indigenous wisdom keepers and recognizing that we are in constant conversation with the rest of Earth. We just haven't been able to perceive it, many of us. And so a lot of this work is really just bringing into light that which is already there, that we just are not recognizing. And we're going to find a very talkative ocean, much more than we appreciate now. And then what, right?
It's a silent world. Don't you remember? Jacques Cousteau.
Well, yeah. Good.
Yeah. Thank God not. It's so fascinating. It's so interesting. It's so far from silent. And yeah, and being able to well, we can talk about it, you know, during this conversation, but all the ways that these new methods are going to be able to accelerate scientific discovery and support scientists who are doing this work in the field, and yeah, really to make legible for us human beings in these, like, you know, we don't have the best apparatus for a lot of what's on Earth to really be able to appreciate. So how can we extend our perception? And then once we do that, what do we do when the voice of nature is undeniable?
Yeah.
What kind of agency do we bring to the forefront in our conversations about governance, about corporate governance, nation state governance? How do we think about animals being part of the conversation, not just the subject or the object of a conversation? That's the kind of like goosebump tingly part of the work that gets us. That's why we're doing it. You know, ultimately, yes, of course, to help us all benefit from an increased knowing in science, supportive science, but really it's because we're facing this existential moment and the window is rapidly closing and we need to change these systems. So how can this knowledge plug into our way of living amongst each other harmoniously so that everyone can thrive? So that's the exciting part. I think.
Do you want to share your slides?
Yes. Okay. Let me.
But you know, it's so interesting. You know, we observe it here just in the yard all the time with just watching the different animals interact and all the calls they make, and you kind of wonder about species to species communication sometimes, just between the animals.
Well, the jays.
Oh, absolutely.
Alarm signal. Everybody listens up.
I love how we have the Stellar's blue jays here, and they oftentimes will mimic the red-tailed hawks, so it chases the small birds away from the feeder, so they come in and steal the food. So I have these little stealth conversations that go on.
Can you see, can we hear you?
Yes, we're hearing it perfectly.
Okay, great. So that I'm Katie Zacarian. I'm the human figure in that photo. I'm a free diver and a surfer and underwater photographer, and happen to be CEO and co-founder of the Earth Species Project. So very big ocean person, and as well as a forest person, all things person. But I feel very deep connection with the ocean and its ecosystems. So yeah, I mean, we're a nonprofit impact organization developing and using novel artificial intelligence to decode non-human animal communication as a window into the diverse intelligences on Earth. And I wanted to talk to you today about language and listening. So I love language. It is very common in artificial intelligence. You hear the term language a lot. It plays many different roles in our work, from computer languages to natural language processing to large language models. You might have heard that term, or LLMs. It's safe to say that language is this very broad category, and there's plenty of people who can talk about many different aspects of language, from writing and speaking to developing and modeling. And today I want to talk to you about a slightly different part of language, which is listening. So my next slide, you can see. So I'm fascinated by listening because, as a form of observation, it is the cornerstone of science. It's also the cornerstone of my job. I'm the CEO of an impact organization that brings together AI research scientists, biologists, conservationists, linguists, ethicists, legal scholars, and so much more all together, professionally, academically, collaboratively. These are photos of some of the work that I've done at this intersection of conservation and technology. So you can see the work there with harbor seals, developing new types of identification tags with leading edge printing technology, some of the work that we were doing trying to develop new types of sensors for tracking orangutans in the Sumatran rainforest. And then at the bottom right are some of the members of my team at the Earth Species Project, where we're whiteboarding out 5 years ago our AI research roadmap. So so listening, right? It's a core part of my daily work because so much of this work involves collaboration, both inside and with beyond our organization. And as you know, it's simply not possible for any one human to be a leading contributor in all those fields I named. So I spend most of my time listening. In fact, I wish I was doing that on this call with the two of you. And so today I plan to share 3 stories about listening with you. And the first is about listening to animals.
Yay, look at that.
Speaking of corvids. So, listening to animals has been a human fascination for millennia, probably as long as we shared the earth with our planetary neighbors. Early ancestors of the people who came to be referred to as the Apache tribe by Spanish settlers in the Americas shared through oral tradition, communicating with ravens directly. That's the species that you're seeing here on the slide. And many First Nations people in the North Americas include corvids in their mythologies. We know in the Quran, Solomon speaks of the language of the birds, about which Sufi poet Attar of Nishapur wrote the epic poem Conference of the Birds. And so all of these are examples, are hundreds, if not thousands of years before an 8-year-old boy at the Frankfurt Zoo made the first known recording of a myna bird in 1889. And it was on the first sort of available for retail consumers recording device called the Edison cylinder, which looked like this. And then 150 years after the Edison cylinder, we've got our own portable Conference of the Birds in apps that can hear bird song blaring, among a blaring city cacophony and identify that species of bird, maybe even its call type, without sight of the bird, without a book, without binoculars, just the perfectly honed lens of a phone in your pocket. And this is what technologies have enabled in our world, from the printing press to the ceramic screen, which is like, this thing on our phone. It doesn't break usually. To the powerful algorithms we're running on sophisticated servers supported by the remarkable feat of engineering that we now find it so boring, we just call it the grid. Technology is said to power innovation, but I don't think so. It empowers our curiosity, and our curiosity, which is science by any other name, powers innovation. So as somebody who's worked at the intersection of conservation and technology, this deeply resonates. I personally love, this is Merlin, or a screenshot of Merlin. Do you guys have the Merlin app?
I have that one, and then of course we have like iNaturalist, and we have other ones out there, but it is truly remarkable that you can, to your point, you can just sort of hear a bird in your yard and you're like, okay, what is that? And then just use
who
that.
is that?
Who is that? And just use that app to hone in on the bird. Then once you know kind of what it looks like, then you can start like looking for it and try to match it up. It's really kind of a lot of fun.
Yeah, that experience of knowing. It seems impossible to me that human beings could walk this earth and not wonder about the inner lives and experience of species that they share it with. And these apps being able to extend what we know. So then, the Edison cylinder, it opened up a doorway. Acoustic recordings of ocean life have been improving for decades. You know that better than anybody. And today, researchers who, study whales and dolphins record not just sound, but gyroscopic movement, GPS location. They capture video. That video footage is incredible.
Critter cam type thing.
They record temperature. I even met a person who developed sensors that has a pH sensor in one of the animal-borne tags, because
think
they're
that,
interested in how did the animal perish and then which animal ate it. And so
yeah.
it was a life cycle tag. And so all of this is happening from the animal themselves. And they've attached these tiny sensors to honeybees, sea otters, even jellyfish, and of course carrion crows, which, we're working on a project with a species of crow that lives in northern Spain, where they've put little backpacks on them. And they've affixed these sensors to listening posts, across from the Amazon to the Arctic, on coral reefs and in trees, listening continuously to these soundscapes for months and even years.
It's really interesting having instruments like these that do look at things like pH, because we know with many marine mammals that they will actively come up into a bay or an estuary or even up into a river, specifically to just try to dislodge parasites that are growing on them. And whether fish do the same kinds of things, there's a lot of behaviors that may be tied to sort of the chemistry, that are tied to the language that they're expressing at that time. And it's like, oh, what a relief! It's finally off. So it's really fascinating to pull those data sets together in cohesive ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's all trying, like, scientists and technologists and those who share that title, they're the most fascinating tinkerers doing the detective work for all of us to extend our ability to observe, to look, to feel, to hear, to listen in any way that the technology allows. And at Earth Species Project, our technology is solely focused on advancing that ability. Our goal, like I said earlier, is to renew our relationship with the rest of nature so that the diversity of species can thrive. And communication, language, really is a catalyzing force in relationships and connection.
Yeah.
And AI is going to make it inevitable that we can translate animal communication to better listen and learn from the rest of nature. And so I'm going to tell you how, but no, just kidding. No, but it's sort of like, where do you start? And this is kind of another story about listening, which is listening to scientists. So that really where this work began was, a listening tour, for lack of a better term, with dozens and dozens of biologists who shared with us their common challenges, which, kind of lined up a pattern of what are, across many species, across many ecologies, what are the common challenges that they face in being able to make scientific discovery. And it's sort of the foundational building blocks that we've been working on. And that is like, how do you denoise this data? How do you detect the species of interest or the signal that you want to tune into? How do you classify it? How do you deal with data scarcity? And so despite the massive improvements in sensor technology, like this sensor you see here, which has led to a data explosion, revealing this Earth that's constantly chattering and in conversation, we've been relatively limited in our ability to analyze it. And so we think that developing the ability to listen and learn at very fine detail and yet at huge scale is probably one of the most important problems that we can solve. AI thrives on big data. And in surveying the challenges, Earth Species Project, one of the first things that we took on when trying to tackle these common problems was, okay, if we're going to develop new models, how are we going to know that the models are performing and improving? How can we as a scientific community even know if our efforts are leading to breakthroughs as machine learners? And so one of the first things that we did a couple of years ago is that you should see sort of some stuff that looks a little bit, it's from a paper published on a couple of things I'm about to tell you about. But so this is Masato Hagiwara. He's one of our AI research scientists. And one of the things he realized is that even unlike sort of processing of human speech and human text and human images, animal sounds did not have something called a benchmark. We didn't have a common ground to be able to review how this math, how these algorithms were performing. And so we needed to start there. We needed to start at the same kind of starting line if the field of machine learning and AI were going to be able to contribute to advancing this science of ethology and cognitive neuroscience and conservation biology. And so one of the things that he did was that he put together a benchmark that's very, very similar to benchmarks found in human speech, something called similar to glue or super glue, which is very well known in natural language processing for human beings. And he put together something you'll find, one of the things I've noticed in the field of AI is everything has a very cute acronym. So we needed to have a cute acronym for our benchmark. And so we called it the Benchmark of Animal Sounds, also known as BEANS. So this is the BEANS benchmark. We published it in 2022, and it was the first benchmark of animal sounds, and it contained 12 data sets, which included land and marine mammals, frogs, toads, insects, and it was designed to be domain agnostic and run across many species instead of traditional neural networks, which had been common in machine learning applied to animal sounds at the time, that focused specifically on one species of communication, like one species of bird. And as part of this research, our hypothesis was that large foundation models, so that's like the architecture that you might be familiar with ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah.
These kinds of models that have worked so well for many domains of human language and even for biomedical discovery and so on, that they could work well for animal signals. And so what Masato did was he published our first foundation model, which is called, again, cute name here, Animal Vocalization Encoder Based on Self-Supervision, AVs, which is Latin for bird. In 2023. And this model was inspired by Hubert, which is a well-known model for human speech. And it performed remarkably well. So it enabled us to be able to do tasks like detection and classification, even if it hadn't been trained on that specific kind of species. And then from there, a researcher based in Brisbane, Australia, David Robinson, saw that we had done some work in AVs, and he extended it with another foundation model called Biolingual. And for this, he aggregated an even larger data set trained on iNaturalist, Animal Sound Archive, Xenocanto, the Watkins Marine Mammal Database. And in doing that, he brought together a data set of acoustic and textual data, creating these pairs. And from there, he created a new state-of-the-art model called Biolingual, which allows ecologists and conservationists and AI researchers, scientists of any kind, to retrieve animal sound with natural language queries. So for example, if you wanted to type into the model, like, show me 4 sperm whales, 2 fluking and 2 rolling on their sides with overlapping E and identity codas heard, it would deliver you back a result, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, really wild.
So interestingly, at the time, David Robinson was not affiliated with Earth Species when he basically used Masato's foundational research in beans and AVs to build Animal Speak, that new data set that I mentioned, and Biolingual, the foundation model. And last year, he joined us as an employee, as an AI research scientist for the next evolution of Biolingual, Natural LM Audio, which we published about a month ago. And this is the first large audio language model for animal sounds. This model is able to sort of detect and classify thousands of species, representing a giant leap forward for this field. So how it works is, like I said, we hypothesized that modern AI could bring those benefits to the field of ecology. And what that means is that we've trained this model on billions of parameters of human speech and music and environmental acoustic data and animal sounds, with the hypothesis that there would be some transfer of what the model understands about how sound works, all of the known information about science that's been published, and that it would transfer that understanding to answer questions about animals. And we were right. So the model does something called zero-shot learning. So it demonstrates a capacity to generalize, to identify species that it's not seen before, and answer questions it's not been trained to respond to. Now, the model is not perfect. It is like the equivalent of the antecedent to ChatGPT, but it is performing way better than random, demonstrating this sort of emergent capacity, which is truly extraordinary because this is just the beginning. The rules of modern AI dictate that this will only get better. And today it works on bioacoustic data, but in the future, it'll be multimodal, layering video, biologger data, and more. So to me, this is what the Edison cylinder has become. It's like if the Edison cylinder is this sensor, the microchip camera, accelerometer, suction cup to a whale swimming 8,000 kilometers across the ocean, and the phonograph is this foundation model. And you know, if I'm being honest with you, like the fact that all of these scientists have come together to continue to iterate on the model, improving its performance, that is the most thrilling part of this work. It's the collaboration, it's the constant improvement among scientists and researchers, the perfecting, the honing, the sharing, and the listening to each other. And I think, yeah, sorry.
just for a moment.
Yeah.
So are you connecting with David Gruber and Shane Giro about their work with sperm whales and their analysis using AI, the Audacious project, where they're finding the equivalent of, I guess you could say, grammar within at least that one species. And you're more like Dr. Dolittle speaking to all of the animals, listening to all of the
Listening to all
animals.
the animals.
And I mean, there's so much that we're beginning to understand the magnitude of our ignorance. The one caveat about the joy of all the breakthroughs that we're getting with using AI to assist our poor brains with analysis, the ability to crunch numbers and assimilate just massive amounts of data. The caveat being there's so much we still don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's leaving just an awareness, latitude for AI can only act on the information that it gets. And there's so much more that maybe they'll open doors to know where there are missing pieces.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. And
What does it mean? It's not just analytically here words, here sentences, but how are these correlating sound and action?
I thought it was really
Mm-hmm.
interesting to look at the work that, one of our past guests, Denise Hertzig with the Wild Dolphin Project has been doing, because she has like a 40-year data set of kind of observations, tying it to sounds that she's observed
Sound
and
and
heard,
behavior.
sound and behavior. And so that would seem like it'd be a really good data set to try to run some, through your system.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone you've mentioned so far are huge, incredible figures in this field. And I think that this is that's sort of what I'm going to share with this, which is like, there are so many researchers doing incredible work across the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that that gets me really excited and optimistic and also gives me makes me pause is just sort of how everyone's work with modern AI is going to help everybody else.
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like also the ecosystem sounds like Bernie Krause started listening to tropical rainforests and now Andre Michel. Andre,
Yeah.
has been characterizing underwater soundscapes, and they have signatures. And this information about how a healthy coral reef, the sounds from a healthy coral reef, can be used to help restore depleted reefs by attracting.
Hmm.
As we're swimming around in the plankton, it sounds like a party's going on. Let's go see what's happening. And
Yeah.
what does it all
Yeah. Karen Bacher in her book Sounds of Life talks about like coral DJs, how scientists are basically trying to repopulate reefs with coral larvae by playing the sounds of healthy ecosystems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so what
think
you're doing
yeah.
is really right on, right, centrally valuable, important in pulling all this together. But I'm dying to know what these emissions are.
Yeah, I think yeah, I guess what I put together here just so you can see is there's this researcher who I met while when that picture was taken of me and the sperm whale. I was on a research vessel with a woman who studies whale louse, which is a species of shrimp. She loves them so much that she had them tattooed on her body. Um, and I just, these are the conservation biologists, the detectives, the decoders who have gone so deep and understand so much. Like I listened to your episode with the researcher who studies echinoderms,
Mhm.
and it's just, there's so much that we know, and despite all of that, there's so much that we don't know, and especially for species that there have been very few known observations, sort of the capacity for us to be able to help in those scenarios, this opens up a whole new possibility. And I think one of the things that like it's interesting to remember is like we're all living together here on Earth. The physics of Earth are the physics of Earth, which means that sound is generated by air passing over a membrane or through a substrate. And that is something kind of universal. We all, there's so many differences, right? We have this umwelt that they say, right? From, Jakob Oxkel, like our lived experience in these bodies with this sensorial system is so different from species to species, but we share so much. Many of us, I think all of us animals have to eat. We got to move to eat.
Right.
We sleep. A lot of us mate if we're lucky. We have complex emotional states, and that overlap is big enough that an AI research model can begin to generalize and learn. And that is what gets me really excited. All of the work that our collaborative, huge community of researchers is contributing to, not just right now, but since 1889, when we started
Right.
recording birds for the Edison cylinder, all that is known, even if it's just, let's just say, like I just read Rhett Butler, who's the editor and founder of Manga Bay, published a preemptive sort of obituary for the vaquita.
Yeah.
And imagine if there's been very few known recordings, and there might be, right? There's all these hydrophones in the water, but to comb through hundreds of hours of recordings to find evidence of the presence of the vaquita, that's an onerous, huge task. And even
Absolutely.
though there's very few recordings, imagine if a future where we would be able to, with an AI research model, in a matter of hours, see if there is evidence of a vaquita or another endangered species.
Right. Well, Chris Clark with bowhead whales was able to give a better estimate of the population than had been possible before because he listened to their sounds.
Mm-hmm.
The visual sightings gave one reading, and that's one measure. But by having the ability to deploy hydrophones and to recognize that there, I mean, it was I think, a good news story. There were more than was previously thought. Chris Clark,
Yeah.
again, of the pioneers, is a
Yeah.
bioacoustician. Is that the right
Yeah,
word?
I think that is. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful that we are listening to them. That may be one of our positive attributes. Um, I don't think whales are analyzing us, but
Maybe orcas are.
maybe orcas are, yeah. Maybe sperm whales are.
Maybe sperm whales are. Yeah.
But anyway,
But it,
please.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, one of the things that, I think that this work, the Earth shot, as we call it, or the moon shot, is a much deeper understanding than what's known about the diverse intelligence. But even if we are just able to automate the tedious and time-consuming, expensive tasks that bioacousticians are faced with on top of their teaching schedules, and they have to publish, if we can
Yeah.
rapidly accelerate the pace of discovery and potentially in real time make effective area-based conservation management decisions, that is going to be massive for empowering those on the front lines who are studying and protecting and advocating for ecosystems for all of us.
Well,
And
we really have to hurry, because when you think about the changes in the soundscape because of us,
ship noise
we
and
recognize it on the
yeah,
land with cars, with traffic, with
aircraft, everything.
everything. And in the ocean, the scaling up since World War II, the 1950s to the present time, with shipping, with seismic activity, with even small boats. And I'm sure you've felt the pain underwater, where you're underwater in a little, even an outboard motor,
Yeah,
just
so like a
buzzsaw.
yeah, like a buzzsaw
Yeah.
going through, and you can feel it and you can hear it, and it's overwhelming as it gets closer and closer.
But we don't live underwater, but most of life on Earth does.
It's a huge impact,
And we're tearing apart this crucial means of communication upon which their existence depends, just as important to them as sight is probably to
yeah,
us.
well, I think some of the other piece of it is that some of the sounds that like, take for instance the great whales and on the land elephants, that they have that really low
Sounds we don't
that
hear.
we can't even hear,
Yeah.
right? That they're so low that we can't
So high.
or so high that we
Yeah.
can't really hear them. But it perhaps is possible that using AI that we would have the opportunity to hear some of those things that before were not hearable
By us.
by
yeah.
us.
Yeah, there's a researcher at Berkeley, Damian Elias, who studies jumping spiders who
My God.
communicate through substrate. You know him?
Yeah, they're in their yard and we're like eye to eye with them, and they kind of hop and hop back, hop.
Yes. But
They're
they've developed new methods to be able to perceive. They're very rapid, communicate the signals that they're generating through new instrumentation, and then being able to analyze that. I guess so you named some incredible members of our growing community. So, David Gruber, Shane Giroux, Denise Herzig, and there are so many others. And so a lot of this work is listening to scientists, Bernie Krause, there's so many in this space, and we have this growing community, and we're getting together, we are having conferences, we're publishing papers together. In April 24, the Santa Fe Institute with X Prize and Interspecies Internet hosted a gathering where we're talking about these topics. There's Professors Yossi Yovel and Oded Rachavi published in Current Biology, the Dr. Doolittle Challenge. We posted in Science with the great folks at Project Ketty and Christian Roots and others.
The musicians as well, like Ergo Ma, it resonates with this acoustic community.
Yes.
And
Absolutely. And the people who study the evolutionary function of music, and animals who have the capacity for music. And, you know, I love the share outs about this work and the hard questions about this work. And, you know, I understand enough to sometimes present a few questions of my own. Sometimes they're helpful, but I'm always listening. And what we're always doing as a team is we're learning, because
Yeah.
we're all very, very passionate about improving performance and contributing to this scientific discipline. And precision really does matter. Like, this could lead to some real tangible on the ground improvements in how we listen to and protect that which we love and which we depend on. You know, and sometimes I joke. So some of the folks you see here are bioacousticians in the upper right in Alaska, listening for humpback whales. That's Michelle Fournet and her research assistant. Down in the lower left are some shark biologists. In the upper left is a convening of folks, philosophers and ethicists thinking about AI, animal ethics, and AI ethics, and the profound implications of this work and how to do it responsibly and safely.
Yeah. And
And then at the bottom right is our team in Ithaca, gathering and hiking around in the gorges by one of the waterfalls there. But yeah, I mean, so much of this work, like I said, it is so interdisciplinary. And so I joke sometimes it's also like decoding AI research and conservation and biology and philanthropy and ethics. And,
yeah,
you know, it's every field has its own nuance and protocol and jargon and abbreviation. And I mean, I already talked to you about the cute abbreviations. Now you'll look and you'll see like AI is just full of models that are named after animals, funnily enough.
yeah.
And, you know, sometimes we all agree and sometimes we disagree, and that's totally okay. These are big, lofty goals, and
yeah,
they're,
that's when real new insights come about.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting as before the meeting here, I was reading about the work that's being done with the Hawaiian crows, right? They're functionally extinct in the wild, but there's some in captivity. But that some of the historic sounds of the wild populations exist and are being played back to the ones in captivity because they've lost that piece of the language. And then trying to understand, what is it that has been lost, right?
right,
Because when you're trying to reintroduce an animal to the wild, be it, California condor or repopulating coral or whatever, whatever animal it is, what is really missing sometimes if the language becomes, kind of fragmented or even extinct, it will help them to survive when they're reintroduced to the wild.
Yeah, that probably means watch out for those primates.
Yeah, it probably means, oh, watch the dude in the red shirt, he's really bad news. But how can that?
They recently did their first sort of release, reintroduction of that population. I think it was in Maui. I noticed in the last couple of weeks. What I love about what you just posited is like, it demonstrates that animals have culture,
Right.
which kind of tweaks people's mind that animals would possess culture. It's like, oh, again, we're othering, we're human exceptionalists, and animals indeed do have culture, and their survival depends on it.
Right.
And yeah, I think, again, imagine any story you've ever heard about our species on Earth, whether it's deforestation or ocean noise or trafficking or climate change. All these stories, the animals are the subject. We talk about them. They're never the narrator or the reporter. And, we're going to achieve a level of listening and observation with this huge community of scientists that are part of this group. And so like, that's my invitation, for scientists and AI researchers and naturalists and everyone, is like, no matter your field, like, this is an approach that benefits when there are more reputable scientists and researchers involved and collaborating, not when there's less. And when we're all trying to listen. And so, call out to those who are in this domain, like everyone is, you know, is welcome. This is a very collaborative type of work.
That's
Team-
good.
A team sport.
Team sport. And
Team
I'm really,
sport.
I'm really kind of excited to think about how, using or analyzing these big sets of data around sound, that perhaps you could make better choices about which areas are in real need of protection, or which will give us kind of most bang for the buck when we protect it. How big should it be to really preserve the soundscape, right?
Right.
Whether on the land or in the ocean, particularly. So
Right.
it's really kind of interesting to think, because right now, like with the Hope Spots, the Mission Blue Hope Spots, it's got certain criteria around it that make it an area that's worthy of protection or restoration. But, I don't think sound's ever been a criteria that we've looked at before. So
Or
maybe it
even
should be.
Ooh.
the major sound created by ships transporting goods. It's cavitation
Hmm.
in the big propellers it's inefficient. You can make them less noisy and more efficient, so it's a win-win. It's economically, you burn less fuel, you make less noise, you speed more quickly, and at the same time you'll have a lighter touch on the ocean. But nobody cared about that
No.
in the 50s and 60s, and most still don't.
Right. If you
Right.
look at the lifespan of these ships, they're designed to last 50, 60 years, something like that. And it's really tough to compel.
Retrofit, yeah.
It can be done, but it's really tough to
But
build the economic case.
but
This could help.
I guess that's kind of like one of the sort of, you brought up such an incredible example, right? Of, Scott McVeigh and Roger Payne listening and revealing with the work of Katie Payne, like the presence of these songs,
Mhm.
and that all that sort of helped to catalyze. And sort of we're looking at this moment of urgent need for more catalyzation of greater action. And it's one thing to stop for a deer in the street. It's a whole other one to ask a huge ship to slow down or completely divert its course,
Yeah.
minimize noise. Ooh, what's this?
This is the old National Geographic magazine that had the
platinum record.
the platinum record,
Yes.
the little, giveaway record right in the pages of the National Geographic. Which year is this? Let's say January
1979.
1979.
Oh, that's epic.
So, it's just so cool that, that that realization that these whales have song, that it changes year to year, that it differs population to population, that it's always evolving geographically. And now having the tools that we have today and with AI to really look at all that history with a new, with some new cuts to it, with some new
That
insights.
is that is one of the things that makes me also very excited, is that we still have these recordings from 1979.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
we can now look back with much better tools. I mean, I remember hearing about Katie Payne, like putting up on her wall these huge pieces of paper, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
able to iterate on her and Roger's incredible work now to reveal what animals we're observing then. I mean, what's changed in a half century of, of human-induced impacts? And I think that was one of the one of the things I was thinking about. So Robert Seyfirth, another sort of giant in this field, in 1980, he published sort of the results of the first known playback experiment, where he played back to a species, their known sounds. These are vervet monkeys. And, back then his team 40 years ago was able to identify that vervet monkeys have specific signals for predators like eagles and snakes and leopards, and kind of like how we have words for things, and that, their infants vocally learn like how we learn. We humans are only born with innate communication of crying and laughing. Everything else is learned. And so, but lots of other species have that as well. So decades later, in 2015, researchers used Seyfirth's original recordings and learned even more about the communications with this new technology. And so one of the things I wonder is like, what will we learn when data can be fully decoded with entire decades of it? So much has changed in terms of our activity in the environment, and we'll be able to actually understand how sound, how communication's been impacted as a window into how these lives have been impacted. You know, and I think it's just, you know, like many years ago, I was working on a project in Aceh in northern Sumatra, listening to many different collaborators. We had the Indonesian forest rangers, wildlife veterinarians, the government, you know, conservation biologists, anti-animal trafficking activists, all working together to rescue the endangered orangutan population. And we also had other data contributors, collaborators like the orangutans themselves. And we had an approximation of, you know, where they were living and estimations of their population growth, but we didn't know that much about this incredibly cryptic species. Like, you think it's going to be easy to see an orangutan in a very mountainous rainforest, and it's actually quite hard. And so for decades, like young graduate students and researchers have been venturing into the jungle to count them manually. We have still not solved an efficient way, an effective way to collect lots of great data about orangutans at great scale. And, you know, one of the projects we were working on was to develop I'm hearing one of my planetary neighbors outside. Sorry, I was just turning to see what it was. You know, the current ability, the technology that we're bringing to this is still so limited. You know, the radio tracking works poorly in the rainforest. The current implants that they use for like intramuscular sensors, they don't work for very long. We can't externally mount tracking tags. Drone surveys are limited. And so in many ways with orangutans, and I would argue with many, many species that live in the ocean, we're still on the Edison cylinder.
Yeah.
You know, we're still, and like we were talking about fish earlier, you know, the researcher I was trying to remember, his name's Aaron Rice. He thinks that up to 2/3 of fish, he's at Cornell, could be making noise underwater. That's just, who knows, maybe it's more. And then the other stat I saw was that, you know, of the 34,000 of ray fin species, that's like cod and tuna and trout, like 4% of them have been studied for sound production.
Yeah, I think a lot of them really do make a lot of sense.
Why should they not all make sounds? All birds make sounds. All mammals. These are our fellow vertebrates, and they've been around a lot longer.
Yeah.
Come on.
This is yeah. I don't know if you guys saw this study this week, or it was a couple weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer. But it was about the cooperative hunting of octopus and fish.
We've seen grouper and moray eels cooperatively hunt.
And grouper and
I've seen some videos of that.
Yeah, and grouper and octopus, even though the grouper could eat the octopus, but sometimes they're using there as helpers, right? So.
But yeah, I love this. I mean, all of us at Earth Species were kind of like chatting about it, and we were so excited about it because, you know, from the surface, it just looked like the fish were opportunistically sort of kind of mooching off of the octopus's hard work, and you know that they were freeloading basically. But then this researcher Eduardo Sampaio from Max Planck, he went down on scuba and observed for a couple hours what was going on, and then he modeled it in 3D and saw that actually there was like a pretty sophisticated social structure of what was going on between the octopus and the fish. And they were delegating roles, they were sharing the leadership position, and, you know, immediately it went from just us simplifying what was going on there, just thinking, oh, there's an octopus hunting and then fish just freeloading. And actually there was probably something much more
tension
of respect and understanding. And Eduardo was able to like listen and reveal this diverse intelligence, of interspecies work, right? And collaboration and communication. And I think about, like, I guess I'm sort of, finishing up here with this last slide of, deep sea, which, and I think, again, like, AI is going to make it inevitable to translate AI animal communication and learn and listen to the rest of nature. And, we're going to have the opportunity to ask the animals, like, how are they doing? Where are they? What are they observing? What do they know that we do not know yet? And then it's going to provoke an opportunity for us to have animal voices have a seat at the table, whatever that table is. Our systems of governance, our legal sort of practices, our culture, they do not include animals. We live in a completely human exceptionalist world. And for the first time, by listening, we may have animals be part of that conversation. We have a new opportunity, and we need it. What we're doing right now is not working.
Not working. No, it's we really so.
And so, yeah, I mean, I extend this to the deep sea because, as we know, so little is known about the deep sea, and it's extreme. I mean, I'm talking to someone who has enabled a lot of what we do know, but we still don't know a lot. And the idea that we could empower animals to be part of the conversations that are going on about extraction from the deep sea.
Yeah, and the introduction of the noise from deep sea mining vehicles would just be, I mean, it's like another dimension of the horror that represents. So it's really got to just not do that, So we are a little bit past the top of the hour, and you actually, it's fine, but you actually answered the two questions that we had in the queue, I think, pretty well. Already. You talked about the recent discoveries in animal communications with AI, and were there any previous theories or hypotheses that you're hoping AI might be able to provide support for? And so I think we just talked about those couple of things, which is awesome.
And Katie, I just want to salute you for not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And it's not just getting information, but leading to a new way of looking at the ocean and therefore looking at ourselves. It's the ethics of science, as well as this whole new era of discovery. I think we're right on the edge of the greatest era of discovery about ourselves and the world we live in. And you're right in the thick of it.
Yes, she is. And she's close by, so we'll have to have her come over and check out the submersibles too.
Yes.
I think she'd be a star in driving submersibles and listening. So
that'd be amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And before we close today, Sylvia and I would like to say thank you, Katie. Thank you to our producer, the Ocean Elders. And thank you to everyone out there in the diving community that keeps coming back and joining us for these incredible conversations. We are really grateful to everyone, and water connects us all. And we will be back 2025. And until then, remember, take care of the ocean.
As if your life depends on it, because
it does.
It does.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy holidays, everything.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.